Hi, I'm Reva with Quality Sewing and Vacuum, and we have a really exciting offer and special that you might want to take advantage of. We have a limited number of some fabulous pre-loved or pre-owned machines, the Pfaff Creative Icon. This machine is absolutely fantastic. It does everything that your heart desires. It sews, it embroiders, it quilts, it does everything. And even though it's pre-owned, it comes with a 1-year warranty, and it's just absolutely the most fantastic price. And again, we just have a limited number, so you're going to want to look at our website or come into one of our stores to take advantage of the deal. Now, I thought I'd show you some of the things that I absolutely love about the Pfaff Icon. It's one of the most wonderful machines to sew on, so why don't we take a look at it? So over here, when we first turn on the machine, we have a nice little menu. You can go in to start embroidering and sewing. You can go to My Sew Net, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. There's a blog, and there's also this wonderful thing called a help center. In here, you have different choices. Maybe you're working on a project and you don't know what type of stabilizer to use. You can come in here and it will talk about the different stabilizers and give you information about the stabilizer and how to use it. That's really cool. Now let's go back here. There's sewing instructions. So if you want to do a specific project, these get added into the machine, and because the machine is actually Wi-Fi, so it can get these projects put into them. Then there's also techniques and tutorials. Now this is really cool. I don't know if you've ever worked with trying to create, let's say you were sewing a skirt and you want to put a zipper in, and the instructions in the pattern aren't very helpful. That's where this comes in. So let's go to closure, since I said zippers, and let's look at zippers. So there's a couple of different styles. There's a separating zipper, a fly front zipper for pants, an invisible zipper, or a centered zipper. Let's look at a centered zipper, because this is something very common that you would use when you were working on a skirt for specifics. Okay, so it gives you all the information here, but every time you see a little item with this little icon here, it means that there's an animation or a little movie that will show you how to do the task that you're wanting to know about. So it's really pretty cool because it walks you through step by step how to do the task. And that's not even machine specific. That's just general information. Now we're going to go back to our information tab. We'll go back to our help center because we looked at some of these things, but then they also have two other things that I want to point out. There's the user's guide and the getting started guide. The user's guide is actually the manual right into the machine, and you can go through it page by page if you want to, or you can go to search and you can type in what you want to add. If you touch there, you can type in buttonhole or whatever you want to type, and then it's going to go through and it's going to look for items that have to do with the buttonholes. Or you can search A to Z. So whatever way you want to do it. But the another thing that's really cool is this pink getting started guide. This is your way to know the basics of how to do things on your machine that maybe you forgot. Maybe you've been on vacation and you can't remember how to wind a bobbin or how to thread the machine. It's really pretty cool. So if I want to know how to thread the machine, I just ask it that I want to see the threading information, and we can move that up and even make it a little bit bigger if we want to. So you can read through everything, but remember, when you see this icon here, it means that there's an animation, and it's going to show you how to thread the machine. So everything that you need to know about the machine is pretty much built in, and that's really fun, but it does more than just give you the information. It sews, it embroiders, it does everything. So let's look at some of the other things that you may want to do. So let me show you real quick something else that's really fabulous about the Help Center. If we choose a technique like hems, we can choose a hem, which I chose the blind hem here. And here is all the information of how to do the blind hem. But if you look where it says content, you'll notice that it displays the stitch that it's talking about. So you can choose to have that stitch and it will load it right onto the machine so it's ready to go. So you don't even have to go hunting for the stitch. So that's really cool. So the machine can help guide you there. But if you want to just start sewing at the beginning, you just start sewing, and it usually will come up with a straight stitch, which of course I had changed because I asked it to. So we have our stitch menu here, and you can maximize this and make it nice and big if you want to, or you can minimize it. But this is where you're going to find your stitches. Now each stitch category, let me get this a little bit bigger. There's different stitch categories across the top. So 1 is utility, 2 is quilt, 3 is needle art, and it goes on and on and on, even into some very specialty stitches. And each stitch category has a subsection. So 1 is the category, and Section 1 is essential stitches. Section 2 is overcasting. Section 3 are buttonholes, and Section 4 are eyelets and darning stitches. And each of our main categories has a section like that. So now let's talk about the machine and why a Pfaff is a Pfaff and why the icon is so awesome. This machine, as I mentioned, has tons of wonderful features. But what good is a machine if it does not sew beautifully and have a beautiful stitch? This machine has an absolutely fabulous stitch. The quality is absolutely wonderful. And I want to take off that foot so you can take a look and see the feeding system down here. You'll notice that it has the 8 different feed dogs, and there's even 3 in the front that are well in front of the needle. And what this means is that you're going to get interaction with the feed dogs very soon before you even start to sew. If you've ever worked with, most machines actually have something called an elliptical feeding system. And what that means is you have your feed dogs, and the feed dogs, you know, they work, and then you take a stitch and then they work again. And an elliptical system, they run on a circle. So they come up, they crest, and they come back down. So you have a little bit of feed dogs in the front, more in the middle, and very little at the back side. Whereas this machine is box fed. What that means is the feed dogs come up all the way in the front, they move to the back, and then they drop down. So they move in a square motion. So you're actually getting the interaction fully with the feed dogs as soon as there's an opening for them. So that means that you're going to get better feeding. If you're a quilter, your points aren't going to get eaten down into the machine, things like that. So it's absolutely wonderful. But we need to thread this machine. It comes with a built-in thread tower, and then there's a spool pin for your bobbin, and then there's also a spool pin for bobbin winding, I should say. It's not actually your bobbin. And then there's a spool pin here that you can use your thread vertically and use a thread tower, or you can use it horizontally if you choose to. And I have this great platform that our thread can sit on, so that way no matter what size of thread you're using, whether it be a cone or it is a sloshy spools. You know, some spools just aren't very manageable. And then we're just going to push the needle threader button, and then our needle will be threaded for us, and you don't even have to find the eye. Love that. Okay, so now let's talk about the quality of the stitching on this machine. One thing that this machine has, and I don't know if you can see right back here, it has this little unit right here. And this is actually a feed dog for the top layers of thread. You can probably see there's little teeth on it. And when you want to use that, you can engage it. And if you don't want to use it, you can disengage it. And the reason why you wouldn't use it sometimes is maybe you're doing free motion quilting, or maybe you're doing embroidery, things like that. You wouldn't need it, or some decorative stitches wouldn't want to use it. But for regular sewing, you're going to want to use that because it's absolutely wonderful. And how this works is it's going to work like 4-wheel drive for your sewing machine. Now, no matter what type of fabric you're sewing on, I just pulled it up. It's a regular straight stitch. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the speed down a little bit so it doesn't go too fast for me. But the upper feed dog works at the same rate of speed as the bottom feed dogs. So that way you're able to do multiple layers of fabric and different types of fabrics without even having to change anything on the machine itself. So you don't have to adjust the stitch length. You don't have to do anything like that. And you know, it takes the denim beautifully, but this is a really nasty, it's a tricot. It's what you might use for curtains. You might use it for home dec or maybe costumes. And it's just a persnickety fabric, and it just feeds beautifully on this machine as well. So let's take a look at that. So we've done all of our layers of fabric. Oops, sliding around on me. So we've done the different fabric. Each one is 2 layers there. And then we have our tricot. So now let's take the dual feed off, and I'm going to separate this guy real quick, and I want to show you the difference of how the tricot will stitch without the dual feed on. So this is like any regular sewing machine now. Okay, so no matter which sewing machine you're on, if you don't have a dual feed, it's going to pucker that tricot. And you can see how much more flat that tricot will work with. So if you're working with Minky or anything like that, it's going to be a lot more fun because you won't have to stress about it. So now let's take a look at our denim here. And I'm going to put my dual feed back on. Now, one question that we get a lot is that, does this replace a walking foot? Yeah, you will have no need to put a walking foot on because you have that on your machine when you have dual feed built in. Okay, so let's do kind of like do a hem here or a side seam, because a lot of times we've got to hem jeans a lot of times, right? So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit and see if we can get that to stitch. So this machine has a wonderful stitch that it will look a lot like the seams that you actually have on your jeans. And that's pretty cool because sometimes it's really hard to match that thread on your jeans when, you know, if you're having to repair them or hem them. So I have my stitch there. I used a dark blue thread, so it's really hard to see there. But what I want to show you is how it stitches. So I have the 3 layers in the seam here, which is typical when you have a pair of jeans. And then we'll turn it up once. So now we have 6 layers, turn it up again, and now we have 9 layers of denim. And I'm simply going to put it under the foot, and then I want you to take a look at how it sews. So I don't know if you can see the dual feed there, but I'm going to go ahead and stop it right here. And I want you to take a look on the back side or on the side here. What makes the dual feed so awesome is that it's going to feed the fabric up and over the lump of the seam. And at this point, this is where a lot of times you will find that you'll get a needle broken, you'll get skip stitches and things like that. And the reason why that happens is that the foot is tipped and not in consistent contact with the feed dogs. It's like this. So only the back of the foot is in contact with the feed dogs. So it's not feeding your fabric completely. With the dual feed on, it's like a 4-wheel drive. It's going to get that foot up and over all your lumps and bumps and all your heavy seams and stitch just beautifully. Okay. So now we've got our seam all sewn. Even though it's 9 layers of denim, it sewed it beautifully. I've got the white bobbin thread, which isn't particularly attractive, but there you go. It did a great job. So no matter where, if you're working on thin or thick fabrics, it's going to do the great job. And in fact, if we come over here into our utility stitches, we even have stitches that are meant for stretch knit fabrics. Let me minimize that, get that out of the way. So maybe you're working on knit fabric, and I have just a square of knit fabric, and I'm going to cut a little neckline in this because maybe you want to make a little t-shirt or something. So I'm just going to cut and make a neckline. This is not how you do it on a regular shirt, right? But you might want to do this. So if you've ever put on a t-shirt and you hear the popping of threads, that's because the stitch that was used isn't made really for a knit fabric, and the thread couldn't stretch. So there are stitches built into this machine that give you the ability to stitch knit fabrics. And so I'm just going to go ahead and stitch, and as I stitch, I'm going to pull the ribbing a little bit here. stitch that we're using is going to give the fabric the ability to stretch and move and whoops and go on over your head. It's going to just work out beautifully. So that's probably enough for right now. We'll just give that a trim. And if you're being nice and neat, you can actually stitch this stitch more on the edge of your fabric, so you have it will be cleaner, but then you have a nice little neckline with a lot of stretch to it with no popping of your seams. So no matter what type of fabric you're working on, you're gonna be all set. So now let's take a look at our feeding system on here. We talked about the feed dogs and how wonderful they are because they're a box fed system. This machine does not have a presser foot lifter. You do that simply right here, right on the front of the machine. So if I want to stitch my fabric, I'm going to put my foot down. Or I could simply just start sewing and it will automatically put it down, which is really cool too. But if you don't have your fabric where you want it, if you push the down button again, it moves it up just a little bit, so that way you can position your fabric exactly where you want it and you're ready to go. When you put the foot up, it raises the foot, obviously, but if you push the up again, it actually gives extra height to the foot. And did you hear that click? That was the feed dogs lowering. So now you can get something really fluffy or puffy through there. Maybe you're working with minky or faux fur or something like that, and now you've got all this extra room and the feed dogs aren't going to get hung up on anything. And then when you start sewing, it's going to automatically put the foot down and start sewing for you. Okay, so let's go back to just a regular straight stitch, because there's some other things that are really cool that I want to show you. So if you're doing any seaming or you're going to be doing a seam, you might want to back stitch when you start or stop. Now usually you would do that with using your reverse key, and you know, sometimes I don't get them right on top and they just don't look nice and neat. This machine has the automatic tie off. So I can say I want it to tie off at the beginning, I want it to tie off at the end, and I want the thread to cut for me. And then to collapse that menu, I can just touch the screen. You don't need to do that, but you can. So now take a look when I start to go. It's going to make a knot, then it will stitch, and when I'm ready to end my seam, I just touch the reverse key, it makes a knot, it's going to automatically cut the thread for me, and then raise the presser foot because it knows that I'm done. And it makes just these perfect little clean knots. Take a look at how nice that is. And then on the back side, when you end, it pulls the threads to the back. So a very, very clean and nice way to do your work, so you have the ends of your seams secured so they don't come undone when you're trying to put the next piece next to it. Great for quilting. It's also great for garments. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for right now because I want to show you something else. Okay, so on here, I'm going to grab a couple more pieces of fabric. One of my favorite features on this machine is that it has a needle down. I use this all the time. Now it also has a pivot feature. So if you're stitching and you stop, it's going to stop with the needle down, but it raises that foot ever so slightly so you can pivot, and so that way you can go to your other direction. And I love using the needle down because if you've ever done a seam and then if the needle comes up and you stop midway and the needle comes up, then you might come off of where you're sewing. So having that needle down is kind of a nice anchor point for your stitching. Now, if you're a quilter or you like to do precise piecing or pin tucks and you need the same length of seam every time, there's a feature on this machine you're going to absolutely love. And it is called the Stitch Repeat. And there's something called the Patchwork Program. Now, what this does is it's going to let you program in a seam of a specific length that it will repeat automatically for you. So let's say we're working with 2-inch pieces, or we're making a quilt with 2-inch squares. All you have to do is bring the fabric and start sewing for the very first time. Then when you're at the end of your seam, just touch a reverse key and it will stop. And I've asked it to stop with the needle down. Then the next time, all you need to do is tell it that you want to sew a certain length, and it's automatically going to stop every single time in that exact spot. So you don't even have to worry about, oh, am I going the right way or what? You just start feeding those squares right in underneath the foot. As soon as it stops, you put another square of fabric to to sew, and off it goes. So that's a really, really handy feature there. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the other stitches that are in this machine. So let's take a look at the decorative stitches. Now in the decorative stitches, there's some really beautiful ones in here. There's things called needle art, satin stitches, decorative stitches, miscellaneous, and I believe in needle art is where you're going to find cross stitches. And my absolute favorite stitches are these right here. They're the antique hand embroidery stitches, and they are absolutely stunning. So let's take a look at how these stitch out. They're really, really quite pretty. So I'll get me some fabric underneath there. Now, one thing to notice is that, let me minimize this a little bit, is on the machine right here, it shows you which foot you should use, if you should use your dual feed, what your speed is. It tells you all about everything there. So if you ever wonder what's the right foot, it will tell you. Now these stitches are designed to look like a hand stitch, and so they're absolutely gorgeous. So let's stitch this one out. So what this stitch does is it actually, it just told me take off that dual feed. So this stitch actually goes over itself 5 different times each time it makes a stitch, so it looks like embroidery floss. So that's really, really fun. And we'll let it do it, make a couple of repeats. And then I'm going to touch the scissor button, and then what it's going to do is it's going to cut the thread as soon as it finishes a full repeat for us. So we should have 2 little scallops here in just a second. So it will actually end at when the pattern has completed. So it's a nice way to get a beautiful look. But look at how pretty that stitch is. And this is a 9mm wide stitch. This machine does have the capability to do 9 millimeters. And where that is of benefit is that it's going to give you beautiful decorative stitches, but it also gives you the ability, if you're a garment sewer or home deck, or even like you like making tote bags, it will give you the ability to adjust the needle left and right to fine tune exactly where you want your top stitch to be. The needle piercing power on this machine is amazing. It has near industrial strength, and it also has a pulse motor. So if you were to sew through, let's go back to a straight stitch. There we go. So if you were to go through, and I'm going to make the stitch just a little bit longer because I'm going to be going through some thick stuff. But if you want to go through multiple layers of fabric, I've got 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 layers of fabric. So that's a fair amount there. I can even throw that denim in there if I wanted to, but I don't know where he went. So this machine with the needle piercing power that it has can actually go up to 32 layers of quilting cotton all at one time, which I don't know why you would need to do that many at a time, but if you're making tote bags and things like that, then it's really nice to know that your machine has the needle piercing power to go through all of those layers. Because I don't know about you, I want to sew what I want to sew, and I don't like it when my machine argues with me. But this did a beautiful job through those 13 layers of fabric, and if we want to even double that up, now we have 26 layers, it's still going to do a nice job. Okay, so isn't that cool that it stitched through all those layers of fabric? I mean, this is a dream. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more about decorative stitches. It has, like I said, the ability to do 9mm stitches, which are beautiful. It even has the ability to do what are called maxi stitches, and actually I have a maxi stitch, one stitched out right here, and they can be as wide as a couple of inches, and they're absolutely beautiful. But there's specialty stitches on the machine as well. There are things called floating stitches, and they're designed to look like there's no thread in between. Even though they're all stitched at one time, they're individual. So like these are floating stitches here as well. And then you have ribbon stitches. These are ribbon stitches, and these are ribbon stitches. And these are just really fun because you actually put ribbon in there and the machine automatically stops so you can insert the ribbon. And so there's tons of things. Oh, and there's something called radiant stitches that actually stitch away from the way you're sewing. So I was sewing along here, and then you pivot to make those stitches. So that's a lot of fun. And those are stitches that are exclusive to the machine. So they're really, really fun to do. And then of course we have hooped embroidery. And this machine does beautiful, beautiful hooped embroidery. And you probably noticed that we've been stitching while the embroidery unit is on it. It does come with a standard accessory tray, and that tray just slips right on. This comes off and this goes on. So you have a normal looking sewing machine, but you can sew with your embroidery unit on. And it comes with a straight stitch needle plate, and it comes with a bunch of different accessory feet, free motion quilting and embroidery feet, and absolutely the best buttonhole foot ever. Makes buttonholes easy, and I know a lot of people don't care for buttonholes, but it's easy on here. So we have the ability to do wonderful embroidery. It even comes with this nice big hoop here, so it'll give you a nice amount of area to stitch on. But I want to tell you a little bit about the system that this machine has. So it has a standard tension system, then it also has a active stitch. So it can transfer from the standard to the thread portioning automatically, depending on the type of stitch that you're doing. Now, the thread portioning is a different type of tension. Now let's talk about what normal tension is. Normal tension systems in every machine are when you put the foot down, the little discs pinch around the thread, and that how hard it pushes around the thread is how slow or fast the thread can go through the eye of the needle. So if you get a lot of birds nesting on the bottom, you might not have it in the tension discs, or if it's, pulling to the top, maybe it's too tight, so you adjust your tension. This has that, but then it also has a secondary tension system right here. And I don't know if you can get in and see that there. There's these little rollers. There's actually 3 of them right here. And the thread goes through there as well as through the standard tension. When the machine's active stitch technology changes from one to another, it's all automatic, but this one, when this takes over, it rolls out and it delivers the thread. So the machine will look, aha, you're doing this stitch or whatever stitch it is, and it knows how much thread is needed to form the stitch. Then when the foot goes down, it goes, wow, you're working with thick fabric. You're going to need even more thread, so it will deliver extra. And then there's a secondary check spring inside the machine that when the needle and the bobbin thread join, it can tell if it's too high or too low, and then it will either hold back thread or give more. So you get beautiful results. And since it's so gentle on the thread, you can do beautiful things with metallics. Like these were all stitched with metallics. And embroidery, this is a double-sided. We have this wonderful mylar thread in both the needle and the bobbin with no other stabilizer, just the organza in there. And you can probably see right there how it's kind of, this thread is kind of like a piece of tinsel, right? So it's not a normal thread. This stuff is so tender, and it usually gives you an awful lot of trouble when you try to sew with it. And we embroidered both needle and the bobbin with it because that thread portioning system gives such beautiful, beautiful results. You can also do things like reversible embroidery, and you can't tell the front. I gotta find the end. You can't really tell the front from the back if you use the same color thread, because the thread metering or thread portioning there gives a beautiful result on both sides. So it's hard to tell which is the front, which is the back. So now let's take a look at the embroidery side really quick. So I'm just going to go down here to my little house, and I'm going to say, let's start embroidering. And in here, you're going to be able to pull out built-in designs that are in the machine, and there's tons of different categories in here, and you can scroll through and you can choose whatever you might like. Maybe I like this one. You touch and hold it, and there it is, and you can simply change the size. You can rotate it. You can even touch and hold and choose duplicate, so you can get multiples on the screen. You can add lettering, and you can add in any stitch, any standard decorative stitch from the machine. You gotta pause. Carmen's coming in the door, I think. Or was that just the wind? Oh, she's already opened. Oh, there's a man. There's a man at the thing. Okay, so we're fine. Okay. All right, and then if you want to, we're going to just delete these. So I'm going to go ahead and just touch and say delete all. Yes, delete all, and I'll get a clean screen. So what I want to show you is something else that's really pretty cool. I'm going to just bring in a decorative stitch, and I'm going to go in, and I think I'm going to grab, let's grab a satin stitch. I'm going to grab a scallop here. So let's grab this stitch right here, and there's my one stitch that it brought in, and I'm going to go to a section called Shape Creator, and this will let us take a design and you can add it into a circle or onto a star, a heart, any of these signs, and I'm just going to use a basic straight line. Okay, and then we're going to go down here and I want to choose Edit. And I want to have more than one on my screen. I'm going to do, actually I'm going to say okay for a second. I'm going to go back here and I want to change my hoop. And I'm going to choose a larger hoop. So we have a bigger hoop to work with, and look at all these hoop choices that we have to choose from. So we have more hoops on this machine than any other machine. So we're going to go back into Shape Creator and let's see if we can add, we'll do 4, and they're a little bit bunched up, so I'm going to touch the corner there and spread those apart so they're just nice and right together, and then we're going to say okay. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to grab this hoop right here. And this is the hoop size that I chose there on the screen. Actually, I have this is a little bit bigger than what I chose. So I'm going to go down here and tell it that it's the 260 by 200. And then there's this hoop right here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the design exactly where we want it to go. And I'm going to grab out, you have two different embroidery feet that we can choose from. You can use this one, which is a spring-loaded foot, or you can use the sensor foot. And this is just a snap-on foot, which is kind of fun. So I'll just clip this on. And all the feet are snap on and off. Now, let's talk about putting your embroidery designs right where you want them to go. We love having embroidery, and if you've ever seen, I don't know, a design that you just put on a shirt, it's, you know, kind of plopped there, that's lovely, but I really liked planned embroidery, not just stick it wherever we get it. So let's look at our little line here. We're going to pretend that I want to have my design in a very specific spot, and I want that my first scallop to be exactly there, and I want it to land exactly on this line. So we're going to do that very easily by using something called precise positioning. So I'm going to tell it I'm ready to go. Now you can see that this is straight across and my line is definitely diagonal. So we're going to go to Embroidery Stitch Out. And this is where we're going to be able to do our stitching. It's verifying that I have my what hoop I have on there, and I'm going to say I actually have my sensor foot on because I use that foot instead, and my active stitch technology is on. All those things are good to go. So it's a nice reminder of just things you want to think about before you start going. And let's put this hoop on the machine. Now, what we're going to do is go to precise positioning, and I'm going to put that very first spot on the design right on our mark, right here on the hoop, and that's where our green crosshair is. Excuse me. So I have that spot chosen. I'm going to touch the second button, and what that does is it locks the needle. That green crosshair was the needle location. I've locked it onto my design. You can notice I can move the whole design, but the needle is still in that one spot. So now I'm going to look over here on my fabric and bring the needle to the exact spot that I want to stitch it out at. Then the next thing we want to do is look at these next two buttons down here. We've done 1 and 2. Now we're going to go to 3. And I want that this next point to be at the end of my scallops. Yeah, you could be doing a word or a design, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to choose that spot, and I'm going to lock it on to that spot. Now, this guy is going to stay exactly where he is. It's our pivot point. Now, all we need to do is rotate our design until our needle is right over where we want it to go. A little bit more. So if you have a wonderful butterfly that you want to have the tip of its wing touch a flower that you have on your fabric, you can use this and get that exact position. So now I'm going to say okay, and then we're going to start sewing this out, and you're going to see how we're going to be able to have our design exactly where we want it to go. But before I do, there is one thing I want to do, and that's in color. I want to come in here and tell it that I want to do it all one color. I don't want it stopping in between each scallop. So, and that's a good thing to do if you're doing lettering, to have each, if you want them all to be the same color, then just have them be monochrome so they don't stop in between each letter. So this is a really awesome feature on this machine. Very easy to use, but you get exact results because you can zoom in and see the exact needle point on a stitch and be able to place it exactly where you want it to go. So let's take a look at our results there. So I'll pull this out of the hoop so you can see really well. And you can see there's my pen mark, but it started the stitch right there and it ended right there. So we got our stitch exactly where we wanted it to go. And we were able to use a decorative stitch from the machine. So if you want to do perfect buttonholes, you can do that. Now, other things that you can do is use something called the ribbon embroidery attachment. That's an option that you can do, and it does beautiful things like apply ribbon to the machine. Now this is a design that's on the Pfaff website, the MySewNet website, which is really kind of fun. If you're doing free motion quilting, just so you know, if you tell it you want to do free motion quilting, it automatically lowers the feed dogs for you and sets everything up. You don't even have to do that. So whether you're quilting or you're sewing or you're embroidering, this machine can do absolutely everything. And again, we have a limited number of these pre-loved or pre-owned Pfaff icons at an awesome special price, and come into one of our stores or visit us on our website at qualitysewing.com. And remember, they do come with a year warranty, so you are covered, and you're going to absolutely love sewing every day with your Pfaff icon.